Welcome to another episode of the Empowered Fertility Podcast, the place where we dive deep into all things fertility. I'm Dr. Brenna Squires, a clinical psychologist and fertility support coach, here to bring you the knowledge, resources, and expert insights you need to feel confident along your journey to parenthood. So let's get started. Welcome to another episode of Empowered Fertility, and I am so excited to speak to you today. We're going to talk about something that's a rather hot topic. It's about insulin and pre-diabetes and fertility. And so I'm excited to give that to you, and I'm going to speak with Dr. Krystalyn Lowery, and she is a women's health expert and the founder of Navigate Wellness, where she utilizes functional medicine to create a truly personalized approach to fertility, helping women and couples optimize their preconception and perinatal health. So I'm super excited to have this conversation. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited as well.
Yeah, and just to get started, just tell me a little bit about what got you interested in what you're doing right now.
Well, it was kind of a long whole thing, as I think many of our stories in holistic health are. My background is actually in genetics and in utero pediatric cancer research. And so that was obviously very heartbreaking, very heavy on the heart. But this was, almost 2 decades ago now, before epigenetics was really a thing. And so as we were doing research, we were unfortunately meeting with families who were going to, trigger warning, have children that probably wouldn't see their second birthday by any means and would be very lucky to see their first. And so after working in that lab, I decided not to pursue my PhD and look more at epigenetic factors and how we can really take control. And we like to joke in the office, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So definitely took a totally different direction, but wanting to do something where we could make measurable changes before people were conceiving, and in something that was so positive to change the story of these families. And so metabolic health really ties in with epigenetics and PCOS, which is one of our specialties.
Awesome. And so for those people who don't know much about epigenetics, can you share a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So a long time ago now, really, especially in the world of research, we really thought that your genes were your destiny, right? We looked at genetics, and based on how your genome was, we were like, well, you're high risk for this disease. And we really felt that there wasn't much we could do. And, now a couple decades ago, we started seeing this way more mainstream, originally with something called methylation, but that our lifestyle, nutrition, sleep, toxic exposures, that there's actually a lot of things that we experience in our environment and even through our daily decisions that affect how our genes are expressed. So how they activate, quote unquote, turn on and turn off, and how they affect cellular processes that affect our whole body health. So this is really empowering, because now we like to say that your genes are kind of like a loaded gun, but the epigenetic portion of that is that you can really choose, do you want to turn on the safety? Do you want to holster that? Or are you going to take the safety off and maybe wave it around a crowded room with your family in it? So our daily choices actually, even in something like PCOS, where there are definitely, which for anybody who doesn't know is polycystic ovary syndrome or polycystic ovarian syndrome, definitely a metabolic component to that, toxicity, environmental, and a genetic component. But just because you have certain genes doesn't mean that you're destined to be sick or suffering or infertile. And I find that to be really empowering, that our daily actions can affect our genetic expression and change the trajectory of our health and our lives drastically.
Absolutely. I love that as well. I love the idea that everything is not destined to go one direction because of something that we had absolutely no control over. And
Yeah.
so the fact that even though we have these genes which kind of are the makeup of what we can do and who we are, there's a way that we can turn them on and off to express one thing or another through, again, like you said, epigenetics, turn one thing off or another so that we can actually alter our journey.
Yes, drastically. I love it. It's very empowering, and I think it's very empowering for a lot of patients because we do genetic testing in our office.
Mhm.
So knowing that when we get to go over genetic results with them, that this isn't, life or death sentence. And it's super cool.
Yeah, that's really good, especially for people who have had physicians pretty much give them that diagnosis or that outcome where they're saying that there's no hope. This is what it is because of your genes, just because this is let's say cholesterol says, you have a Jadine, your cholesterol, it says that you're going to have high cholesterol forever because it's in your family.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that it will happen, because we need to turn it a different direction to be able to shift your life
Yeah.
a different direction. So I think that's amazing as well. And kind of moving into that, you mentioned something called metabolic health. And I know there is more buzz around that right now, but can you briefly explain that before we go into the insulin portion of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's very exciting because a lot of us have been focusing on this in practice with private clients for a long time, but it's still very murky, but now buzzwordy at the same time,
Yeah.
not a great combination. But I'm super excited people are finally being like, I want to optimize my metabolic health. 10 years ago, I had never seen anybody want to optimize their metabolic health on an intake form coming into my practice. And it was like Greek to them. So now people understand that I think the other big thing is when we think metabolism, a lot of times people think, oh, well, that only affects weight loss, right? Like, how do I burn my calories, or can I lose weight? Oh, I can't lose weight. My metabolism is slow, or my metabolism is fast. And again, with that kind of predestined, oh, well, no one in my family has a fast metabolism, or oh, I think this happens a lot. Like, oh, well, my husband's family all has a fast metabolism. My husband has a fast metabolism. I just don't. And so when we look at metabolic health, we're really looking at things that are sometimes hard to measure, but we have so much improvement in biometrics and the ability to measure this and take control of it on our own now than we ever used to. And we really look at cellular function, and what we try to think of it as good cellular communication, good cellular energy, and really making sure that we're not having systemic inflammation. And those are some key factors I think you can break it down into that makes sense to most people. You get really nerdy on the biochemistry side. But when you think about, like, do my cells and thus my organ systems in my body make energy well? Do they utilize it well? Do they communicate to get the job done that they need to get done well? And a lot of that we can track at home even.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, it just made me think of the parallel between mental health and our body. Does our body even have good mental health? Can our body's system do the different functions that it was designed to do? And then
Mhm.
can they communicate with one another well enough to make our whole body function at an optimal level?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so complex and beautiful and amazing. And a lot of times we just have to get out of the way, really. One of the things that we can look at is removing interference to allow good metabolic health so that your inflammation comes down, so that your body can produce efficient energy, so that cellular transport and communication happens well. And then people also are like, oh, I feel and function a heck of a lot better.
Yes, and that's wonderful. And that kind of brings us full circle to what we're going to be talking about today,
Yeah.
because a lot of people have this, but we don't really realize how much control we have over it and how much we
Hmm.
can actually alter our path just by changing a couple of behaviors. So let's go into the role of insulin in the body and how it affects our overall health.
Absolutely. Insulin is one of the great things because it is measurable. So, looking at our insulin sensitivity or resistance, and I'll define kind of the job that insulin does. A lot of people like to say, well, insulin tells the body that energy is available, that sugar, glucose is available. So, when you eat something with carbs in it, and again, we could go down, simple carbs versus complex carbs, but basically, your body preferentially in your brain, it's really easy to burn sugar. So, most of us are adapted to burn sugar. You can be keto adapted and be adapted to burn fat as well and burn ketones. That's a different conversation. Insulin is all about having that blood sugar. So when let's say you eat something with pasta in it, simple, pretty easy carb, you break it down. Now, as your body's digesting that, your blood sugar, the glucose that's circulating in your blood vessels, goes up. And your body says, hey, more sugar is available. So your pancreas goes to work and secretes more insulin. There's different ways to drive that blood sugar out of your bloodstream and into your cells, which we can circle back to in a minute. But when we look at insulin, insulin rises, and then insulin brings those pathways, the gates to your cells. So you have a cell membrane and basically have little gateways. We could really get nerdy, but think about insulin's kind of like the key that opens the door to let glucose into the cell. And that's just one way you can get glucose into the cell, but it is a very primary way. So now your blood sugar in your circulating bloodstream drops back down, and your body has a more normal blood sugar. Glucose or sugar is inside the cell, and your body can use that for cellular metabolism. So when we have a good balance of blood sugar comes in, insulin goes up, and your cells are receptive to insulin because they haven't been bombarded by it too much, which is what generally happens in the Western diet. Your body has this nice give and take. Insulin goes up and then insulin drops back down. When your blood sugar is dropped back down, your body makes energy, you function, you sleep good, you heal good, your hormones are in balance, you have high fertility, and the cycle can continue with a healthy diet and lifestyle. However, as you know, we can talk about in a minute here if we'd like to continue on, insulin resistance is kind of that next thing that people go, well, what if that system is not functioning well? And that's where something like insulin resistance comes into play.
Yeah, and as you were talking, I was just kind of thinking about when you said when we are receptive to it and not bombarded by it. It's just that
Mm-hmm.
that general idea, even like thinking about how we are at a personal level, even sensory speaking, when we're receptive to something, it's different than if we're overwhelmed by that. If you're overwhelmed by something, yeah, that's what you immediately think of. When you're overwhelmed by something, your mind, your body, everything about you wants to just kind of pull back and say, "Wait a minute. I don't need any more. I can't handle this anymore." And being able to be receptive to something really means that you're in balance. You have
Yeah.
good boundaries, you're in control of the balance of things, and now that you're in control of that balance, you are more receptive to receive and you're more receptive to give. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's kind of what you're talking about because that's the same thing at an emotional level, but it seems like
Yeah.
it goes down to a cellular level. And that's kind of
It
what
really
you're
does.
mentioning is the insulin aspect of it, right?
Yeah, and exactly. That's such a great way to look at it because when you're able to take it in and process it, you can receive, you can also give, you communicate effectively,
Yeah.
and that is that good communication pathway. It's like we get a lot of, right? I work with a lot of people through preconception and fertility, and then perinatal care, that we work with them through their pregnancy, maybe another pregnancy, postpartum. A lot of times moms are touched out, needed out, right? You can't receive any more input. You're just so overwhelmed. You need a break. The communication is off, the mental health is off, and the cellular energy works in a similar way, but your cells can't yell, hey, I've had enough. But insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance is a way that on a metabolic level, your body says, hey, I have had enough. This is too much.
Yeah, actually go into that. Can you share a little bit more about what that insulin resistance really is?
Yes, I would love to. So, insulin resistance happens, and this is where there is a bit of that genetic component and predisposition in certain people, but our lifestyle really triggers that. When we eat like standard American diet, right? There's a reason why that is SAD acronym. It is a SAD diet. It's what we use in research, clinical research, as like the controlled junk version of nutrition. Like, I don't think a lot of people realize that. When we do research, the standard American diet is what they use for like malnutrition, basically. They're like, oh, this is a bad diet. Let's compare it to Mediterranean or paleo or, carnivore or anything you want that there's research on. The control group is generally the standard American diet, which is really sad. So, standard American diet is full of processed food, additives, and a ton of excess fast sugar. And it's generally giving us more caloric and sugar fuel, more carb heavy, quick carbs than our body actually needs. If you are not working out daily and training daily, we can go down the additives and the fact that it's kind of franken food, not real food that our body can recognize and utilize well. It's nutrient deficient. But focusing just on the insulin, it's too high in sugar. So if you're constantly eating processed foods or even very quick carbs, sometimes people think they're eating really well. And we have a case study that we're going to go through later and in our bonus material where this person came to me and they were like, I eat really healthy. But when you looked at the balance of what they were eating, it was fruits, it was even, grains, things that are touted as health foods. But this woman was getting such a high, glycemic load, things that were so bioavailable in sugar that eventually her body was coming up through insulin, more insulin, constantly elevating insulin every meal, every day, all the time. And so when your cells are bombarded by that insulin all the time, it affects their response and sending those gates to the surface of the cell to say, great, we'll let glucose in. Because eventually your cells are like, kind of like a club running at capacity, right? Like, no, we don't need any more. Sorry, insulin. Don't try to pack any more people in our club. Don't put any more glucose in this cell. We can't do it. And eventually that turns into fat. And when we have fat inside the cell, that also messes up cellular transport within the cell and communication without, which is another downstream negative effect of prediabetes, insulin resistance. But basically, the cells become numb to that bombardment of high insulin, but then there's still too much sugar in the bloodstream. So now the insulin stays high because what the feedback loop says, well, there's still too much blood sugar. We're too high. We have to keep insulin out here. So now you have those issues, which is where it really starts to affect fertility and plays a role in things like polycystic ovary syndrome.
Yeah, so again, just saying that overwhelm of one thing, overwhelm of insulin in the body just because of our what we eat, what we
Mhm.
do. And yes, there
Yeah.
is a genetic component where some people are more predisposed to be more sensitive to that.
Yeah.
But for everybody, if you have way too much sugar, you're
Yeah.
going to be at capacity. Now, are you going to be at capacity to here, where you might be not as predisposed, or at capacity to here? Either way, you're at capacity. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter how you got there. You're at capacity and your body's overwhelmed and it's saying, no, that's too much. And so
Yeah.
that's a good example that you said of insulin resistance. So how does does it turn into diabetes, pre-diabetes? Can you explain the connection with those three?
Absolutely, for sure. And I always think of it as bandwidth, right? Your genetics may be set a different bandwidth, and sometimes this is where it can feel a little unfair. Maybe you did marry into a family where your husband or your sister-in-law has this really great bandwidth and it feels like they can eat pasta and have dessert every day and it never affects them. But we like to look at the data to know if that's true or false. But when we look at that, your bandwidth, you can control what happens within your bandwidth. So even if you have a little bit less bandwidth genetically predisposed than everybody else, then at least you know what you're working with so you don't overload your own system. And that's where it becomes empowering. When we have chronic, constant, elevated blood sugar, elevated insulin, it drives a lot of cellular stress and it really does not allow us to be healthy and it drives systemic inflammation. One of the ways that we can measure this that's more common with maybe your PCP, a Western doctor, is measuring your hemoglobin A1C or your HbA1c. And that's really the Western definition of are you, diabetic, pre-diabetic, not diabetic. And so those levels look a little different if you're looking at it from a functional aspect or from a Western aspect. But basically, it is a average of the last 3 months of how much has that hemoglobin run into a random sugar molecule that's running around messing stuff up. It's kind of like you got, it's a rave. People are running around causing issues. Your blood sugar's out of control. So that's measured as a percentage. And typically, when you look at that, if you're 6.5% or higher, you're diabetic. And that's just showing that there is damage from uncontrolled blood sugar. And insulin is the lever to help control that blood sugar, but it's not the only one. So it is what we look at for insulin resistance. Prediabetes comes from that uncontrolled blood sugar. Your insulin, your pancreas is saying, hey, this is not something we're able to keep a handle on just by myself. Just insulin and cells, we're not managing this load any longer. Prediabetes in the Western world is 5.7 to 6.4%. And this is where kind of my beef. A great example, we had a patient come to us. I looked at her labs. She was like, oh, yeah, I'm really healthy. She was right borderline for everything, right? When she looked at her A1C, it was 5.6. I was like, in my world, you're pre diabetic. In the Western world, your blood sugar is fine. But she ended up having some life things happen. She didn't start care with us for a few months. When she came back, we did new labs. She was at 5.7. All of a sudden, her OB-GYN was like, oh, you're pre-diabetic. And I was like, okay, so we need to be more preemptive with how we look at this, because I would really like to see your A1C 5.4. That would be great, showing that your blood sugar is not out of control all the time. There is a much higher percentage of the time that you're in a controlled range, which we love to see 75 to 90. Western medicine will look at your fasting glucose or fasting blood sugar as 100 or less is good. 90 to 100, I still would say you're getting a little bit high, especially if you're spending a lot of your time there. And that's where something like a continuous glucose monitor can really come in, or a CGM, which is becoming way more bioavailable data to everyone and more available, not just to diabetics. So when we have that uncontrolled blood sugar, insulin can't keep up, we end up in a prediabetes range, and eventually we can end up as a type 2 diabetic, which is very different etiology than type 1, and that's definitely something we want to recognize here for our patients. We understand they almost should just be classified as different diseases. It's almost unfair that's type 1 diabetes or type 2. very different paths to get to those two somewhat similar endpoints of uncontrolled blood sugar, and that's just not the same disease.
Yeah, and all of what you're describing, you said it a little bit earlier with cellular stress and just basically overwhelm. Your blood sugars are your cells that are carrying the the insulin are overwhelmed. They've reached capacity. And one thing I've described to many of my clients are when you're overwhelmed and you've reached capacity, that's when you turn into burnout, where you've
Yeah.
reached the capacity to handle something at a level that you used to previously handle. And so like you're
Yes.
saying, with if we have this much capacity for insulin and now we're going over here, now we're getting insulin resistance, and then we're getting pre-diabetic, and then we're getting diabetic, your blood sugar is screaming, I've been asking for help for a long time and you've not done anything. And so it sounds like, at least with the standard American diet, you can get this quite easily and not even realize it.
Yes, and this is something that, if you're familiar with Dr. Mark Hyman, he's pioneer in functional medicine. I love the way he talks about this. He's actually broken it down to like 8 different steps, and I think that's a lot for most patients to really compartmentalize. So the way I like to make it a little bit more simple is, this is one of my biggest issues with, you go in for your general checkup with your PCP, and they probably get a fasting glucose, and if you're lucky you get an A1C, and if that A1C isn't 5.7 or above and your fasting glucose is under 100, they go, you're fine metabolically. However, for up to, depending on the studies you read, 8 years, maybe even as long as 12 years, if you also just pulled a fasting insulin, you would see insulin is elevated, because your insulin starts to elevate for many years before that blood sugar gets out of control in a fasted state. And this is where CGM comes in, because our insulin starts to go up and our body goes, oh, I needed more insulin to really shove this into the cells. And that's where that overwhelm you're talking about comes in. So now insulin is forcing more glucose into cells than it needs. It's turning into fat. It's turning into unhealthy fat that is disruptive to other biochemical transport and very, very important cellular messaging functions. But you can think of it as too much fat in the cell. It's very toxic and unhealthy. But that can be elevated and elevated and elevated. And if no one's checking it, your insulin could be very high and still managing to drive too much sugar into cells, bringing your glucose down. And this is where you can be pre-diabetic without even knowing it. And you're starting to show those signs. And I think it's really important people go, well, if I have uncontrolled blood sugar, and let's say I don't have access to a CGM and I don't have a fasting insulin, my fasting glucose looks good, my A1C is kind of, it's at 5.6, 5.5, it's a little high, should I be concerned? How would I know? And so I tell people, like, right, your body, just like when we feel overwhelmed, is going to communicate to you, even if it's not in words. So things like hunger. If you go too long without a meal and you get grumpy, angry, moody, you notice you're snapping with your friends, your spouse, your family, your kids, if you're hangry, that's a sign of dysregulated blood sugar. And I call it the blood sugar roller coaster. It is usually steep spikes up, which without measurement you may not know, because this is not what they're testing in a fasting glucose. And then we have what's called reactive hypoglycemia. So then that kind of dips, it drops, it tanks out, and now that signals to your brain, food emergency, our blood sugar is way too low, we need more. And this drives that roller coaster of, okay, now we're going to secrete too much insulin, and you're on this roller coaster ride that's not any fun. You can't get off it, and this can be happening. So if you're hangry, if you have really intense carb cravings, if you get reactive and moody, or fatigue. A lot of times we see it as fatigue or excessive thirst. Like, I just can't seem to get enough energy. Or if you start journaling, a journal is the best free thing you can do. Put it in the notes app in your phone. If you can journal, okay, I ate, then I had like a rush of energy, and then I had a slump. I could have taken a nap. A lot of people instantly think thyroid. Sure, it could be that. We see a lot of thyroid dysfunction in my office. But a lot of time we see dysregulated blood sugar and insulin sensitivity along with issues with thyroid. And that's really something, like, if you're irritable around meals, you're hangry, or the last one that I love to point out is, if you wake up in the middle of the night, you're not perimenopausal, and you're like, yeah, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. wake up, That could be dysregulated blood sugar. Your blood sugar is too high maybe after dinner. It tanks too low in the middle of the night, and your body then secretes cortisol, stress hormone, and your liver has to free up glycogen or take action to get your blood sugar back up, and that cortisol wakes you up. You become alert. So what people go, oh, I just never sleep through the night anymore. But my hormones, I don't know, I'm too young for menopause. Things like that. That is worth investigating and advocating for yourself, even at your next visit, for a fasting insulin. When I order it out of network, it's $5.40. Do not let these people tell you, oh, it's too expensive. No one orders that. We can't order that. Just because they don't know how to interpret it or they're not used to ordering it does not mean they cannot. I've had multiple clients come back to me. They want to go in network and use their insurance. I go, great, save the money, you pay for that insurance. They want to get their labs from their OB-GYN, their PCP, their midwife. And they go, oh, no one orders the fasting insulin. Or, oh, I can't order that. We don't have that. Oh, that's a really expensive test. No, it's truly just not. Don't settle for that. Your health is more important, and so is your fertility.
Yes, I'm so glad you shared all of those symptoms and all of those things because I've experienced them before in the past, and I know I've had many clients that experience them. The one that jumps out that I know that my entire family can attest to is the hangry, where
Yeah.
um I mean I've gotten so much better as my hormones have been balanced, but I know for a long time I'd have a lot of energy, and all of a sudden when I say I'm hungry right now. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's like this big flashing sign that if you don't give me food right now, I'm going to have problems. I don't necessarily get angry, but I definitely lose energy very fast. I get irritable, and don't talk to me unless you're going to hand me something.
Yeah. It's
And
edible,
it needs to
right?
be a snack that I want.
Yes.
And so and so that I feel like there's a lot of people that have that and they don't realize that's a really big indicator that something is off. And I also really like that you shared the testing and the cost because that was something that was surprising to me before I actually got into being able to offer that to my clients, being able to offer labs to them. When I got to see behind the curtain of how much some of these labs cost, I was shocked because I had a lot of professionals telling me, "Oh, you don't want to do that. That's expensive." And when I added it up, like you said, some of the tests are $5,
Yes.
$3, $20. And if I knew back then I could assess these certain levels in my body for $20, I would
Yeah.
have just done it. Forget the insurance. Forget the insurance. I would have just done the test because I think that's more important. That saves you a lot of money long term in your journey if you can just pay the $20, pay the few dollars right now so that you can go in um and get that test to be able to look at what's going on. And in the fertility world, I just kind of want to circle back to that. How much does this impact fertility in men and women? Because I feel like it's a
So
lot.
much. Yeah, and that's the thing where a lot of times you're like, wait, why are you talking about blood sugar? I thought you were a fertility doctor. Like, don't you work in endocrinology? Or like, or are you a diabetic doctor? Like my dad was type 1 diabetic. And so growing up, we always called his endocrinologist the diabetic doctor. So, it's funny how your life and all your journeys bring you exactly where you're supposed to be. But it is so huge because uncontrolled blood sugar, and this is where let's sneak this little tidbit in, your cells, different cells in different organ systems, different types of cells in your body become insulin resistant. That overwhelm, no more, I can't take it, this isn't working, I'm overstuffed with glucose. They become insulin sensitive and insulin resistant at different rates. So this is where really fertility, and then the other thing that we see a huge thing in that maybe doesn't spark a trigger for everybody, but brain health is your brain and your ovaries are super extra susceptible to the damage and oxidative stress caused downstream by uncontrolled blood sugar. Your skeletal muscle, other organs can cope and say, no, I'm resistant. I'm done.
Mhm.
Like your skeletal muscle, there's a lot of organ systems and cells that have better boundaries. Let's say they set better boundaries with their glucose and insulin, and they say, no, we're full. We're not taking any more people. No.
Mhm.
It's like when all your family wants to come for Christmas and you have no more beds and you have a new baby and you're like really overwhelmed, but you have no boundaries. So you just say, of course. And then you end up sleeping on a like air mattress with your toddler and your newborn, and you go, why did I do this? I'm miserable. Like your brain and your ovaries don't know how to set healthy boundaries. And hopefully that's like a good mental set. So when we have uncontrolled blood sugar, and then really high insulin. This is where I really see a lot of people come to me with unexplained infertility, either on the male or the female side, but it's typically, unfortunately, still at this point in the conversation, females that present first with the diagnosis of unexplained infertility, and the male cause infertility is often not assessed right away. You know that as well as I do. Frustrating, ladies. I hear you. That's something that Dr. Brenna and myself both do not stand for. I think, we are looking at this as making a baby as a team sport, and it's really important to look at mom and dad or both partners' health. So with typically women, what we see is that insulin is really high, but their blood sugar is still under that 100. They don't flag for this, but they come to us, and when we look at that fasting insulin, we see, whoa, that's really high. When insulin's really high, it works with luteinizing hormone, or LH, and it affects that reproductive syndrome, and this is what can really disrupt ovulation. And this is where it comes into that polycystic ovary syndrome, PCOS diagnosis, because one of the hallmarks of that, there's 3 criteria that are currently still used, flirting with a 4th, called the Rotterdam criteria, to diagnose polycystic ovary syndrome, and one of them is irregular anovulatory cycles. This can be directly influenced by uncontrolled insulin. Really high insulin and really high LH together affect that ability to have healthy ovulation, not only to get pregnant, but also downstream to stay pregnant. But thinking ovulation, no ovulation, you're not getting pregnant. So when we see really high uncontrolled blood sugar and uncontrolled insulin, this affects our hormone balance, and it causes imbalance in both men and women. So this is where, when we work with couples on helping to bring their insulin and blood sugar to balance, this is both partners. It's a team sport, and this affects the hormone balance of both sexes very equally. And this is kind of funny because it works the same but in reverse. So in females, your estrogen, your female sex hormones are going to be aromatized into androgens. Think testosterone. So you're going to go less on the female hormone profile and too high in the male hormone profile. This is another one of those 3 Rotterdam criteria for PCOS. So anybody wondering, maybe I have PCOS, maybe I don't, I haven't been diagnosed, what the heck is that? The 3 criteria that are accepted are anovulatory or irregular cycles. Think sometimes 28, sometimes 35. Typically more than 35, we're going, that's really irregular. Or your period just disappears for months on end and then it comes back. And I take beef with this, but the number one thing people do is, that's not going to be a problem until you get pregnant. We'll just put you on the pill, which is absolutely not regulating your hormones. It's covering up the underlying issue and allowing it to worsen. So ladies, if you had irregular cycles and somebody put you on the pill and thought that was going to fix this, shout us out. Like, let's chat. We have so many resources for you. You've got lots of options to help heal. Even if you're going to stay on the pill, you can still work on your metabolic health underlying and the underlying issues, so that if or when you come off the pill in the future, you're much better, in a much better health state. So anovulatory irregular cycles, and then hyperandrogenism, or, we're looking at things like unwanted facial or chest hair on the abdomen, more masculine-like features, a lot of acne, body weight, fatigue, a lot of like the brain fog, fatigue things that are overlooked. Typically, people sometimes will even have dark patches in armpits or neck or their groin, and that's a sign of that metabolic dysfunction underlying. So you're going to aromatize and create more testosterone, more androgens. That creates more of that hyperandrogenism, more of the masculine-like features, more of the acne, and people are like, what is going on with my body? In men, your testosterone is going to be aromatized to more estrogens and female hormones. So when your testosterone's down, this is going to affect your sperm count, quality, everything that it takes to make sure that you are making healthy sperm. And this is why we have a program, From PCOS to Pregnancy Prepped. We work with both men and women, and we work with them 4 months prior to conception, because you want to think about how long it takes a sperm and an egg to mature and backdate that, reverse engineer. It's really, you want to be 70 to maybe 100 days. I love 4 months to make sure that you are really healthy on a cellular level when that egg and that sperm that are going to come together are undergoing maturation. So you have healthy androgens in men, healthy sex hormones in women. You've got good hormone balance in both partners. And now you're set up to have not only good conception, but a healthier pregnancy and being able to sustain the pregnancy.
Yeah, I really like how you broke that down so in such detail, but the biggest thing that stood out to me that you were just saying was the differences. that it has on men and women. If you have the high sugar or high insulin, it has a reverse
Yeah.
impact on it, on the sperm health, on the egg health. It has that reverse impact, which really puts you in a really bad position because you need what you're supposed to have. Women, you need the estrogen at the right level. Men, you need the testosterone at the right level. And if it's getting reversed, that's not helping for conception. And like you said, long term to pregnancy, to that road. And so let's look a little bit more into the testing. So now that we've learned a little bit more about that, because you did an excellent job, I don't even need to summarize anything. So let's look a
Hoping
little
people
bit
try.
into into that testing. Like, how do you even test for it? You threw out some different acronyms like CGM and HA1C, and people are probably thinking, "What in the world?" Don't make me Google this stuff.
Well,
Can
the
you
good news
share what those
is
things are, like different tests to assess for all of these things?
absolutely. And the good thing is Dr. Brenna and myself, we don't we're not going to leave you to Dr. Google. Don't worry. We do
Yeah,
have yeah, a freebie for you that will break this down as well. You can go to the landing page, it'll be in
awesome.
the show notes. So,
Cool.
we've got that set. However, if you're driving, please don't click on that right now. So, when we look at things like, I love a CGM, which stands for a continuous glucose monitor. This can be a really powerful tool for the people that go, I'm pretty sure, I'm hangry. I'm that person who has fatigue. I wake up in the middle of the night. It goes on your arm, and oh shoot, I'm wearing a sweater so you can't see. So there's a sensor here on my arm that will check interstitial glucose. So it's a little bit more delayed than if you did like a finger stick, and it's not as accurate as if you had like a venous draw at your doctor, but it's going to watch your glucose and how it responds to one, food, which we've been focusing on a lot. But I think the coolest thing a lot of our clients, when they wear a continuous glucose monitor, notice is they had a bad night's sleep. They had a really stressful day at work. They were traveling. There are other factors besides just food that will
Mhm.
affect your blood sugar. And this is one of the really powerful things about utilizing, I love weight training, but movement, exercise, a way that
Mm,
feels like a reward for your body. You don't have to go lift weights if that feels like a punishment. But that allows us to get blood sugar utilized and out of the bloodstream without being reliant on insulin. So exercise is one of those like easiest hacks. The weight vests are finally trending on Instagram. I love this. I've worn a weight vest for years and years because I am a CrossFitter, so we've used those. But like walking my dog wearing a weight vest. What an easy. I'm gonna walk my dog anyway. Make it a little bit harder. Burn off that blood sugar. A walk after dinner, right? So the CGM gives you that. I call it a study of N equals 1. That study of just yourself, your own bio-individual data, because you'll get to learn how susceptible you are to things like stress, sleep,
mhm,
exercise, and even certain foods. Like white rice affects my blood sugar a bit. It does not affect my husband's blood sugar nearly as much as I think science would even make it make sense to. I cannot believe that. White potatoes spike my blood sugar like nobody's business. I'm Irish. This is so unfair. Irish heritage, not from Ireland, but I'm like, this is crazy. I would love to eat potatoes. That's a surefire thing. If I'm eating potatoes at dinner, it doesn't matter if I have healthy protein, if I take vinegar before, if I walk the dog after, my blood sugar goes into a crazy high range and I have a reactive hypoglycemia. That might not be true for you, but something like a CGM allows you to know that. And then
yeah.
when you're looking at maybe your annual visit, if you're somebody who wants to start with what you got,
Mhm.
most people will do a fasting glucose and an HbA1c, a hemoglobin A1c. That's that percentage where you really want to see, I like 5.5, 5.4. So if you can get a fasting insulin, you can calculate something called HOMA-IR, homeostatic model of assessment for insulin resistance. That is a fantastic thing, and it is in, the download that you can look at, and we'll chat about that more in the bonus section as well. But if you don't have those things, your triglyceride to HDL ratio, most people know their triglycerides, most people know their HDL, and you can look at that and use that as an assessment on something like when you're not driving. You can probably look up your health records and actually take that for your last couple years and see what's the trend on that, and that can give you a good base starting point to say, hey, is my metabolic health trending in a positive direction or staying steady in a healthy range? Or am I starting to see that move into something that perhaps is quite unhealthy or a warning sign that would validate the cost for me to say, hey, I really want to see that fasting insulin, or I want to go outside of my network and just do private labs and $5, right? Plus a blood draw is like 10, so really $20. You're going to see that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're only charged for the blood draw for that one. So if you want to see your vitamin D and magnesium and some other things with it too, it really becomes, like I say, skip one date night, make dinner at home and eat on your back patio and get you and your partner tested. That's going to pay dividends for years to come. And you can look at things like that to really see, how are my ratios and where am I sitting without having to do it too much work. You can get your own baseline.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's something that would be worth doing even if you're like, I don't even know. I don't really track my symptoms and I don't think I have insulin resistance. I don't think I have diabetes. How worth it is it to just say, even if I don't think I have any of these things, do you think it would be worth it just to test?
You're talking to another functional medicine doctor, so obviously yes, right? Like full bias warning. We use a company called Thea, which we're going to show the dashboard and some of the data in that additional part of the bonus recording, which I'm super excited to go over. That is like $99 to sign up. It's through a practitioner. We use them, and you can take pictures on your phone and log everything. Here's a picture of what I ate. Here's when I worked out. It's so easy to track and get the data and just be so empowered. It's then $99 for the sensors for a couple $100. Even if you never, you're probably not listening to this podcast if you don't want to have kids. But if one of your friends doesn't want to have kids, this affects your risk factors for cardiovascular disease, stroke, Alzheimer's. Like, do you want to live strong, healthy, independent, vibrantly, and be like the best mom, dad, aunt, uncle, godparent in the world? Like, this is valuable data for every human.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for sharing that because I've had a lot of people will say, um, I don't have a problem with that. And I want to just explain to them you don't know you don't have a problem
Yeah.
with that because you're not getting it tested just because you think it's not an issue and or you don't want to spend the money. And when we think about the cost, some of it does cost a lot, and some of
Yeah.
it can cost as little as $5 or
Yeah.
as little as free if you ask your doctor if your
PCP.
insurance covers it. And
Yeah.
it's not going to hurt anything to have this additional information to say that this could be impacting your overall health. This could be a barrier to your fertility. And so I just think that that's just super helpful. And I'm really excited about, like you said, the bonus session that we're going to be having. So a bonus session after this podcast in the Empowered Fertility Resource Center, we're actually going to go through a case study and look at somebody's chart, look at somebody's monitor, look at their results, and kind of look at what they did about it. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to include that in the show notes. Um, but as we're talking a little bit more about this, what can someone do? Like, let's say once they get these tests done, and it does show that they have insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance, what are some things that they could do with their diet or their nutrition that could kind of help with this?
Absolutely. And there are things you can do that cost a lot of money, and there are things you can do that cost almost nothing. So
Mhm.
let's start with the like next to nothing.
Like the
If
weight vest you said, that could be
Yeah,
something that could be you can either just add extra weight with whatever you have, or
yeah,
you can purchase something like that and it's a one and done purchase.
so easy. Yeah, and that's like the gift that keeps on giving. If you have a baby, wear your baby, right? Like, ooh, look, baby weights, right? Like, there's so many things that I do see a lot of people, and Dr. Brenna, you probably see this as well. They like had no problem getting pregnant with their first, and
Mhm.
then they're like, wait, what do you mean I am struggling to get pregnant? Like, I have this beautiful, healthy baby. We know how to do this. We did this already. And so, don't discount if you're struggling to get pregnant with a second. Like, don't discount some of these things and go, well, I must not have a problem because I got pregnant healthfully the first time, or I got pregnant the first time. Were you on a borderline of like your body gave everything to that pregnancy to get that baby over the finish line and now you're really depleted? So that's a I'm topic for a different day. But there are things that you can do. The number one thing, gosh, it's so hard for me to choose the number one. I feel like there's like a couple ties. Like, no naked carbs. If you think this is an issue, you should start your day with a savory breakfast. The company Levels is kind of cool. Everybody that signed up for it, their data, like in their original beta testing group, was anonymized and used for like basically a huge study. And that's Dr. Means and Dr. Hyman, and they did that. And Levels is pretty cool. It is a continuous glucose monitor company. And so they asked these people to chart the top 5 worst for your blood sugar, so going to cause insulin resistance foods, were breakfast foods. They were normal American breakfast foods. Things like cereal, things like your oatmeal, things like your Pop-Tarts. These are things that are not breakfast. Y'all, you can come at me on Instagram, that's dessert. Like, that is not breakfast. It's not breakfast for your child. It's not breakfast for you. It does not power your cells and your hormones and your brain for a successful day. Start your day with at least 30 grams of high quality protein and no added sugar. Do not add sugar to your breakfast. If there are healthy, natural carbs in your breakfast, go for it. Like, great. I love having, a lot of times I'll have like a big bowl of like, I come from a family of hunters, so we're blessed to have venison, we'll have bison, we'll have elk. So, if you've got some healthy meat, maybe a couple farm fresh eggs cracked on that, and mine has zucchini and squash, and there's sweet potatoes in there, and mushrooms and onions and garlic, and it's just such a nourishing bowl. And then I go in to see patients. I'm clear. Those patients get the best version of me. I can problem solve for them. I can help them achieve their goals because my cells and my brain are powered well. Most people people come at me on Instagram, that's not breakfast, that's dinner. Maybe try eating dinner for breakfast. Like, definitely don't eat dessert for breakfast. And if you're eating carbs, even if that's something like a banana, right? Oh, look, it's fruit, it's healthy. That should not be eaten on its own. That is a one-stop punch ticket to a blood sugar roller coaster. You're going to spike up, you're going to come down. You're not going to be your best self. So no naked carbs. Carbs are your, like, needy friends. They can't be left alone. So
I have a question with that. So you just
yes.
said don't eat a naked banana. So let's say somebody wants to have a banana for breakfast. What should they put with the banana?
I would say banana comes after lunch. First of all, stop putting that in there. But if you really can't live without a banana, it could go. I know a lot of people, I'm a whole foods first kind of person, but a banana could go in a protein shake if you're a really busy person, you're heading to the gym. So it needs a friend of protein. Sometimes that can look like something like nut butters, or it could be, on the side with like maybe some high protein, full fat yogurt, or even cottage cheese. Some people are like, that's weird, doesn't go together. And some nut butters. You could put some powdered cacao and cinnamon on that. Cinnamon is great. You do need a lot to really positively affect blood sugar. People with PCOS are always like, put that in your coffee. I'm like, sprinkling it on your coffee is not enough cinnamon to move the needle. But if you're a big cinnamon fan, you can do cinnamon. Just skip the sugar. It's not cinnamon and sugar. It's just cinnamon. You could do cacao or cocoa powder, and you could mix that into some yogurt and just start reading some labels. Oh, is this, because a lot of yogurt is like low fat. They pull out a lot of the fat. It's not a lot of protein, and they add in a lot of sugar. So ideally, plain yogurt is going to be your one that's easiest to go, oh, look, it's got healthy fat. We could go down the whole like dairy train. You could do coconut yogurt. I am not a big fan of like the oat products. Oatly milk, Oatly, all the things that are oat. Sorry to call out a specific brand. All oat milks of any brand. That is a pretty quick glycemic hit. That's going to be very high sugar. So you could use also a scoop of like we use Designs for Health a lot, of like a paleo protein or something mixed into that yogurt.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of always having everything be a protein powder, but it does fulfill a need for busy moms and busy humans.
Yeah, so making sure that the biggest takeaway I got was making sure that they're paired. Something that's sugary is paired together with something that is um higher
Protein.
fat in protein.
Protein,
Fat
fat,
and
and some fiber
protein.
if you can get it.
And preferably don't eat that for breakfast. If you're gonna have something sugary, have it later on in the day. Because like we talked about earlier on, the sugar will just bring you higher and then make you crash more. It's
Yeah.
not the same type of wave when you have the
High
integrated
protein
protein
first.
and fat with it. It's more of a flat wave, but still it's not
Yeah.
as helpful to have that early on. So what
Yep,
is
we're
your
thinking more rolling hills than roller coaster. That's what I
yeah,
tell my patients. Think rolling hills,
I
that's
like that.
normal. It's going to fluctuate. You want rolling hills that you'd enjoy on a bicycle, not a roller coaster. And the cool thing about even like CGMs that people learn when they're wearing that and monitoring is your breakfast affects your blood sugar the
Mhm.
rest of the day. It's crazy. It's like every meal is not independent. The other meals are dependent on that breakfast. And this is
Mhm.
where, if you want to touch on intermittent fasting, this is a great segue to talk about that.
I was just gonna ask you that question because I was curious about the intermittent fasting part where some people will say, well, if I can't have this for breakfast and I can't have that, I'm not gonna have breakfast.
Yeah.
Or I'm gonna skip a meal because it just gets so frustrating. So what is your take on intermittent fasting for fertility?
So I know this is going to ruffle some feathers. I spoke at a conference last year and I shared a stage, not at the same time, thank goodness, with somebody who really teaches fasting for women.
Mhm.
And I was like, ooh, I'm like, she's got a lot of research. And so a lot of people go, oh, this is very researched. A lot of the research we have is based on men, first of all, which is a huge issue. And then secondarily, the research that we do have on women, so people go, oh, well, this is based on research in women, is perimenopause or menopausal women. And it's typically women who are very sedentary, like literally
Yeah.
defined in the study as sedentary. So if those things don't apply to you, which I would say 99.9% of my clients, those they're not menopausal, right? They're fertility, or like this is mostly fertility perinatal care. And then maybe it's because I'm an active person, or right when you get on our website and all of our everything, it shows us being active. If you don't fit those criteria, we really need to evaluate if fasting, especially long fasts, are effective for you. And in something like PCOS, people go, oh, well, I'm just going to fast because that'll reset my insulin sensitivity.
Hmm.
Not wrong, not incorrect. That would be an intervention to reach an outcome, maybe not a long term lifestyle. Your body needs to have enough carbs to feel safe to sustain a pregnancy. If you do extended fasting for an extended period of time, we really do find that it's not for the vast majority of people, this is not going to be your best bet to get pregnant. And we can chat about the research on that if you'd like, but you need to be eating. So if you are somebody who's really struggling with insulin resistance and you know that you are insulin resistant, one of the things that depending on when people come to me in their journey, there are certain times where I'll ask people, "Hey, are you cool with putting the pause on TTC and actually trying to conceive for 4 months while we reset this?" And then we can go for it. But really, whole foods for pregnancy, eating breakfast. One thing that we see people who are really into fasting, we shift it to time restricted eating. And if you are going to do a time restricted eating model to reset your insulin sensitivity, I support that. I would strongly encourage you, if it can fit with your family and your lifestyle, if you're going to skip a meal, skip dinner, not breakfast. Like, wake up and so this is where we can get into more hormones. Cortisol. Your cortisol comes up in the morning, you have a cortisol, awakening response, and then it comes down. When your cortisol comes up, that needs pregnenolone. If you are constantly stressed out, high cortisol, we call it the pregnenolone steal. It steals that mother hormone precursor that you need for things like progesterone to keep you pregnant and to ovulate, and all of your hormones. It's very, very crucial to make sure that you're nourishing your body and sending your body molecular signals via food that says you're nourished, you're safe, and things like high protein, high fat, high fiber, and complex carbs in balance with those do this very effectively. And so the vast majority of our clients are not fasting in preparation for preconception. And I'm happy to always honor, I've had people go, well, I have a teenage daughter and she's, you know, anxious about eating and I need to model eating dinner for her, but she's out of the house, so I'm going to skip breakfast. Like, that is such a unique situation. When we're talking about for the average person,
Hmm.
nourishment is crucial. Also, just to make sure you're getting enough, like, essential, something like choline, right? I eat eggs
Yeah.
every day. Choline is what we call an epi-nutrient. It's actually a nutrient that changes your genetic expression. It's essential for a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby.
Hmm.
Most of your prenatals don't have enough, and most of your diet doesn't have enough. So now you're skipping breakfast, where people are most likely to eat choline-rich nutrients like eggs. You're
Hmm.
just not setting yourself up for preconception and fertility success.
Yeah, and I'd really like how you explained all of that with the difference between intervention versus lifestyle. And at the end of the day, are you setting yourself up for success to get pregnant? Because in order to get pregnant, your body needs to feel safe, and it's not feeling safe if it's hungry. And that's what it is when you're fasting, you're kind of resetting some things.
And it can be a powerful resetting tool. I'm not negating that, like,
Mhm.
there is a time and a place for fasting.
Yep.
It literally tags unhealthy cells to be recycled. There is a magical power in fasting. I
Yeah.
just think that, right, what is it that they always say? The dose makes the poison. Like,
Mhm.
what is enough of a good thing? What is too much? Even something so amazing like vitamin D, you can be toxic in if it's really high. So the dose makes the poison.
Yeah, and intervention is very different in all aspects of it, not just fertility. An intervention is very different than a lifestyle. Intervention is usually more hardcore, more intense, more um again, that's severity, and it's all
Yeah.
short. Yes, very
Control.
short, because we just need to get you from one place to another as quickly as possible, a little bit of a reset, and then now we can do the lifestyle factors.
Yeah.
Uh, and so that's really good, and it kind of just brings us full circle with all of this stuff. And I just want to, we're getting close to the end, and I just wanted to know your thoughts on what would you recommend people's first steps be? Let's say someone's listened to this whole podcast, which now I'm looking at the time, I'm thinking, wow, if you've listened to this whole podcast, I am so proud of you guys. This has been long, but it's been very informative because we don't hear this often. And this would be a lot of reading if you had to Google all of this and funnel through. So this has been super helpful. I hope that this has been helpful and informative to you. But now people who are at this point are wondering, what are my first, second, and maybe third steps? What should I be doing if I feel like this could be me, or I want to explore this a little bit more?
So the first thing I would do is leverage what you already have. So grab your records that you have. If you are thinking about getting pregnant, you've probably been to the doctor, you probably have some labs. Down like mosey on over, download our guide so that you can get the right ranges to interpret that and look at what you have. The second thing would be to control what you can control for free. Set a standard sleep and wake time. Go to sleep in a room that is cool and dark. Do not fall asleep with the TV on. Guard your sleep like your life depends on it, because it does. It truly does. So I would say make your schedule fit your fertility, right? So that looks like having a set sleep time and wake time, having a
Yeah.
savory, high protein breakfast, getting sunshine sometime in the morning. Everybody on Instagram's like, do it within 30 minutes of waking. I get up before the sun during the winter. Like, I get that this is not always realistic. Get some morning sunshine. If it doesn't look like you can get out until lunch, eat lunch outside or go outside and start working on, honestly, the easiest one in step 2 is like your step count. When am I active? Do I go for a walk? If you are completely sedentary, then start walking. If you
Mhm.
have weights at your house or you don't, start body weight squatting. Do 50 body weight squats a day. Text a friend and start a challenge. Like, so sleep, savory food, and movement. And then the other thing I would say is if you're not doing this yet, chart your cycle. Most people do if they're thinking about getting pregnant, but there's a vast lack of information in, like, just the way we're brought up in, like, America on what a normal cycle is. If you're not charting your cycle, we have a free paper download. We have a guide for our favorite ones that are free that you can do on your phone. If you have an Apple phone nowadays, like, the health app is actually decent. Start charting your cycle and start journaling your symptoms. Get that baseline for yourself. One, get your labs, get your old labs, and look at those. See what's there and what's missing. Maybe you're going to start making like a lab wish list. I call it the lab laundry list of like, what do I want to get checked?
Mhm.
Then start the things you can control. Sleep, food, so high protein, cutting out processed food is a huge another one. Make sure you're getting some sunshine, and then take note of your stress. I always tell people I have no magic wand to get rid of your stress, but what we can do is try to give you some tips and tools to increase your bandwidth so you have a little bit more bandwidth. And then the third thing, if you're really serious, would be to take action and book a consult with wherever you are. Like, we have networks you could book with one of us. Dr. Brenna is an amazing resource. She has a community. Like,
Mhm.
check out what is going on that you
Yeah.
can leverage, because I know, I imagine for you as well, we have a lab shop. You can take your health into your own hands and order a fasting insulin if you want to see it through our lab shop. You do not have to book a consult with me to get that, because I don't believe in gatekeeping your health information. It belongs to you, which isn't true in every single state in the US, which is insane to me. But like, we give that autonomy back to you. gather that data so that you can make an informed plan. And if you don't know what to do after that, that's when you call, like, raise a hand. One of us will help you.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you so much. Those were excellent first, second, and third steps. I mean, if you need any more help after that, that's when you contact Dr. Krystalyn or myself. You contact somebody to get that extra help because you already gave enough steps where you could just hit the ground running
Yeah.
with what you need
You're
to do right now.
yeah, you're
I'm
ready
so
for
excited.
takeoff.
Yes, awesome. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this podcast. And so I know we're going to speak a little bit more in our bonus session. So if you're interested in that bonus session where we will be going over a case study about someone who had insulin resistance and improved their fertility. So I'll include the link on how to get access to that. But for now, I just want to thank all of the listeners out there. I just want to thank you so much for listening. And I really hope you learned something. And I want to thank Dr. Krystalyn right now for sharing all of her amazing advice, all of her amazing knowledge, and the tips and tools that she gave us today. So thank
Thank you
you.
so much for having me. Yeah, it was such a joy. Give us a follow at Navigate My Wellness on all social platforms and keep learning. Your fertility journey never ends. You can do this. So, thanks for
Awesome.
having me.
Thank you so much. And again, thank you for listening. Until next time. Thank you for joining us today on the Empowered Fertility Podcast. For access to the bonus content, as well as exclusive resources to improve your health and fertility, head over to the Community Resources Center. You can scan the QR code or click the link in the description. Remember, your story is not over yet. There's always another path forward, and we're here to explore it together. See you next time.